I remember the night the forest tried to swallow me whole, the way the moonlight bled through the branches like silver knives, slicing open the dark, and how my heart thundered louder than the howls closing in behind me. I was running barefoot, dress torn, breath ragged, because the village had decided I was the curse, little Ilara, the girl who saw shadows move when no one else did, who whispered to the wind and heard it answer back. They called it witchcraft, I called it loneliness. The pack of werewolves that hunted me that night wore no fur yet, only the faces of men I'd known since childhood, their eyes glowing amber with the change, torches raised, voices chanting for blood to break the drought that had starved us for 3 seasons. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, and I knew the ravine ahead was my only chance. If I could leap the gap, maybe the river below would carry me away. But the edge crumbled beneath me and I fell, arms windmilling, a scream caught in my throat like a trapped bird. Then a hand, cold, impossibly strong, closed around my wrist, yanking me upward into arms that smelled of midnight and old roses. I looked up into eyes the color of winter storms, framed by hair black as a raven's wing, and a face so beautiful it hurt. "You're safe now," he murmured, voice like velvet over steel, and the wolf skidded to a halt at the ravine's edge, growling but not daring to cross the invisible line he drew with a single glance. He set me on solid ground, his cloak swirling like liquid shadow, and when I whispered, "Who are you?" he only pressed a finger to my lips, the touch sparking something ancient inside my chest, before vanishing into the trees as silently as starlight. I stood there trembling, the echo of his promise thrumming in my blood, while the howls faded into the distance, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if the stories about the vampire prince were more than bedtime warnings to keep children from the woods. That night, as I limped home through the sleeping village, the mark on my wrist where he'd held me began to glow faintly, a crescent moon that hadn't been there before, and I knew with a certainty that terrified me, that my ordinary world had just cracked open like an egg, spilling secrets I wasn't ready to taste. The next morning, I woke to the scent of rain on the windowsill, even though the sky was cloudless, and when I reached for the locket my mother left me, the one with the cracked portrait inside, the clasp opened on its own, revealing a tiny symbol that matched the mark on my skin. I should have been afraid, but instead a warmth bloomed in my chest, like someone had lit a candle in a room I'd forgotten existed. Days passed in a blur of ordinary chores, milking the goat, mending the fence, avoiding the villagers' sidelong glances, but every twilight I felt eyes on me, not hostile like the wolves but watchful, protective. Once, while gathering herbs at the forest's edge, a single black rose lay on the path, its petals soft as silk, and when I picked it up, a memory that wasn't mine flickered behind my eyes. A ballroom of crystal and candlelight, a boy with storm-gray eyes offering me his hand. I dropped the rose, heart racing, and ran home, but that night I dreamed of him again, the stranger who saved me, only this time he called me by a name I'd never heard, Leora. And when I woke, the sheets were damp with tears I didn't remember crying. The village elders whispered of omens, of the drought worsening, of sacrifices needed, and I began to notice how the shadows in my room stretched longer at dusk, forming shapes that almost looked like wings. One evening, as I sat by the hearth stitching a tear in my only good dress, the fire flared blue for a heartbeat, and in its flames I saw his face, lips moving soundlessly, and I swear the words were, "I'm coming back for you." I pressed my hand to the glass of the window, searching the dark, but there was nothing but the wind sighing through the pines, yet the crescent mark pulsed like a second heartbeat, and I knew the mysterious prince wasn't finished with me. Curiosity tangled with fear inside my chest, a knot that tightened every time the moon rose fuller, until one night I found myself walking to the ravine without meaning to, drawn by an invisible thread. And there, on the same rock where he'd caught me, lay a silver ribbon tied around a single white feather. I tied it into my hair, the silk cool against my scalp, and for the first time since the hunt I smiled because whatever he was, whatever I was becoming, it felt like the beginning of something written in the stars long before I was born to a village that feared the night. The ordinary world I'd known, quiet mornings, predictable sunsets, the weight of being the girl no one quite trusted, was slipping through my fingers like sand, and in its place rose a question that kept me awake. If he saved me once, why did it feel like he'd been waiting centuries to do it? That was the soft hook that pulled me under. The moment I realized the vampire prince wasn't a savior passing through. He was the axis my entire world was beginning to spin around, and I hadn't even learned his name. The changes came in whispers at first, like secrets the wind carried from the forest and slipped beneath my door. I'd wake with the taste of copper and honey on my tongue, though I'd eaten nothing but bread and broth the night before, and the mirror would show my eyes a shade brighter, the green flecked with silver that hadn't been there yesterday. The village noticed too. Old Marta crossed herself when I passed, muttering about devil's marks, but I hid the glowing crescent beneath long sleeves and told myself it was imagination. Yet every dusk, when the sky bruised purple, a restlessness stirred in my bones, urging me toward the tree line, and once I found footprints outside my window, bare, elegant, too long to be human, that vanished into dew before I could follow. I began dreaming in a language I didn't know, words that tasted like moonlight, and in those dreams he was always there, the vampire prince, standing at the edge of a frozen lake, reaching for me across cracking ice. I'd wake gasping, the sheets twisted around my legs, the mark on my wrist burning as if branded anew. One afternoon, while fetching water from the stream, the bucket slipped from my numb fingers and the water froze mid-spill, forming delicate spirals that spelled a single word: soon. I stared until the ice melted, heart hammering, then ran home to sketch the symbol in charcoal before it faded from memory. That night, thunder rolled though the sky was clear, and lightning illuminated the forest in stark white flashes, revealing a silhouette on the ridge, tall, cloaked, unmoving. I pressed my palm to the windowpane, and for a heartbeat our gazes locked across the distance. I felt his sorrow like a wave crashing over me, ancient and aching, before he dissolved into shadow. The next morning, the village well ran red for an hour, tasting of roses when I dared a sip, and the elders called an emergency gathering, blaming me without saying my name. I stood at the back, pulse racing as they spoke of banishment, of binding my hands with iron to cure the strangeness, but when the headman pointed at me, a gust of wind slammed the meeting hall doors shut, snuffing every candle. In the darkness I slipped away, running until my lungs burned, and collapsed beneath the same oak where the black rose had appeared. There, carved fresh into the bark, was the crescent moon, and beneath it a single word: trust. I traced the letters with trembling fingers, tears falling because I needed to, but trust was a luxury for girls who hadn't been hunted by their own. Days blurred. I avoided the village square, took winding paths through the fields, but the signs followed, ravens leaving feathers at my doorstep, the scent of midnight roses lingering in my hair after sleep, and once a melody hummed by no one that made the locket burn against my skin until I opened it to find the portrait had changed. The woman who'd been my mother now had my face, younger, smiling at a dark-haired boy whose eyes I recognized. I slammed it shut, breath hitching, because the boy was him, centuries younger, and the realization hit like cold water. Whatever bound us had roots deeper than this lifetime. The confusion coiled tighter each night. I'd sit on the roof, legs dangling, staring at the ravine until stars blurred, whispering questions to the dark. Why me? What do you want? And sometimes the wind answered with a sigh that sounded like my name spoken in his voice. One twilight, as I gathered kindling, a butterfly of pure shadow landed on my wrist, wings tracing the crescent mark, and for a moment I saw through its eyes. Him pacing a stone hall lit by blue fire, fists clenched, arguing with unseen figures in a tongue like cracking ice. The vision vanished when the butterfly dissolved, leaving me kneeling in the dirt. Wonder and fear braided so tightly I couldn't tell them apart. I began leaving the window unlatched, half hoping, half dreading he'd come, and on the night of the harvest moon, swollen and gold, I woke to find a single drop of dew on my pillow that refused to evaporate, glowing faintly like liquid starlight. I cupped it in my palms and it showed me his face, closer now, eyes pleading, mouth forming the word mine before the droplet soaked into my skin, leaving warmth that spread to my toes. I sat up, heart racing, because the confusion was crystallizing into certainty. The changes weren't random, they were invitations, and the prince wasn't just watching. He was waiting for me to choose the path that led back to him. The ordinary girl I'd been was molting feather by feather, and what emerged beneath terrified and thrilled me in equal measure, because every sign pointed to a single impossible truth. I was waking up to a world where love and danger wore the same face, and his name was the key I hadn't yet turned. He stepped out of the mist the way dawn breaks over water, sudden, inevitable, and so beautiful it stole the air from my lungs. I'd been walking the forest path at twilight, drawn again by that invisible thread, when the air thickened, sweet with roses and ozone, and there he was, leaning against an ancient yew, cloak pooling like liquid night. Up close, his presence was a low hum beneath my skin, magnetic, making the crescent mark flare with heat. "You came," he said, voice soft as falling ash, and the sound wrapped around my heart like silk. I should have run. Village warning screamed vampire, monster, death, but my feet rooted, and all I managed was a breathless, "You saved me." His smile was small, sad, ancient. "I've been saving you for longer than you know, Leora." The name hit like deja vu and I swayed. He was there in an instant, hand steadying my elbow, touch cool yet igniting sparks along my nerves. We stood inches apart, the forest holding its breath, and I noticed how the moonlight loved him, gilding the sharp edges of cheekbones, the soft curve of mouth. "My name is Alara," I whispered, but it felt like a lie, and his eyes, storm gray ringed with silver, softened. "Names are doors, little star. Some open to rooms we've forgotten." He released me gently, stepping back to give me space my body didn't want, and from his pocket drew a tiny music box of carved bone. When he wound it, a melody spilled out, the same one I'd heard on the wind, and suddenly I was 5 years old, dancing in a moonlit garden while a boy with those same eyes braided daisies into my hair. The memory vanished as quickly as it came, leaving me gasping. "What are you doing to me?" I asked, not accusing, just desperate to understand the ache blooming in my chest. He closed the box, the silence heavier. "Remembering for you. Until you're ready to remember yourself." We walked then, side by side but not touching, the path unrolling beneath our feet like a carpet of shadows. He spoke of stars that sang, of oceans that held memories in their salt, of a bond forged when the world was young and fragile. I listened, heart tilting with every word, because his voice painted pictures I'd dreamed but never seen. When I asked why the wolves hunted me, his jaw tightened. "They sense what you are becoming. What we both are." The pronoun sent a shiver through me, delicious and terrifying. At the stream he knelt, trailing fingers through water that froze into lace around his hand, then offered me the delicate sculpture. "For the girl who carries summer in her veins," he said, and I took it, our fingers brushing, the contact a spark that lit every nerve. The ice melted against my palm, becoming a single white petal that smelled of him. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions, why me, what bond, how long, but the words tangled and instead I said, "Will I see you again?" His gaze dropped to my lips, lingered, then returned to my eyes with an intensity that made my knees weak. "Every night you look for me, I'll be there." He stepped back, cloak flaring, and the mist swallowed him, but his parting whisper drifted back. "Dream of the lake, Leora. I'll meet you on the ice." I stood long after he vanished, the petals soft against my cheek, heart pounding a rhythm that felt like his name though I didn't know it yet. The walk home was a blur, the village lights distant and unimportant, because something vast had shifted inside me. An emotional tether snapping into place, pulling me toward a horizon I couldn't see but could feel in my bones. That night I dreamed of the frozen lake, and he was waiting, arms open, eyes promising truths that would shatter and remake me. I woke with dawn painting my room gold, the petal on my pillow now a perfect white rose, and for the first time since the hunt, I wasn't afraid of what came next. The mysterious figure who'd saved me body and soul was no longer a shadow at the edge of my world. He was the gravity reshaping it, and every beat of my heart echoed the same impossible question. What happens when a village girl falls for the night itself? The ordinary world I'd clung to began unraveling the way old tapestry frays, one thread, then another, until the picture dissolves into chaos. It started with the dreams bleeding into daylight. I'd be kneading bread and suddenly smell frost on pine, feel his hand in mine, hear that melody winding through the rafters until flour dusted the air like snow. The village animals shied from me. The goat refused my touch, chickens scattered when I neared the coop. At the market, whispers followed. "She walks with death. The prince's mark brands her." And I pulled my shawl tighter, but the crescent glowed through wool like a coal. One morning, the locket scalded my skin, and when I opened it, the portrait was gone, replaced by a tiny mirror reflecting not my face but his, younger, laughing beside a girl with my eyes wearing a crown of stars. I snapped it shut, heart racing, and hid it beneath the floorboard, but the image burned behind my eyelids. Coincidences piled like storm clouds. Every path I took led to the forest's edge, every song on the wind carried his voice, every reflection in water showed me older, regal, standing at his side in a hall of moonlight. The elders summoned me to the circle of stones, binding my wrists with blessed cord, chanting to drive out the darkness. But the ropes snapped like spider silk, and a gust of rose-scented wind scattered their herbs. I fled before they could try again, running until the village was a memory, collapsing at the ravine where it all began. There, the rock where he'd caught me bore fresh carvings, our initials entwined within the crescent, though I'd never told him my name. I traced the grooves, tears falling because the realization crashed over me like cold water. This wasn't chance, wasn't haunting. It was destiny wearing his face, and my ordinary life of quiet mornings and predictable sorrows was the illusion. That night, the sky opened in a meteor shower, each streak a silver thread pulling me toward the woods, and I followed barefoot again, until I reached a clearing I'd never seen, though it felt like home. In its center stood a circle of white roses, and at the heart, a gown of midnight silk shimmering with tiny stars. I stepped into it without thinking, the fabric cool as his touch, and when it settled against my skin, the crescent mark blazed, projecting light that painted the trees with scenes. Him and me as children chasing fireflies, as teenagers stealing kisses beneath willow trees, as adults crowned in a ceremony of blood and starlight. The visions faded, leaving me trembling in the gown, and I understood. The ordinary world wasn't shifting. It was ending, making room for the one we'd lost. I whispered his name though I didn't know it, and the roses bloomed wider, releasing fireflies that spelled trust across the dark. I gathered the hem of the gown, heart pounding with terror and exhilaration, because the small but powerful realization crystallized like ice. I wasn't Alara the outcast anymore. I was Leora, his lost mate, and the life I'd mourned was the cage keeping us apart. The village, the drought, the hunt, they were the last barriers, and something ancient inside me was rising, ready to burn them down if it meant reaching him. I walked back through the forest as dawn painted the sky rose, the gown trailing like liquid night, and when I stepped onto the village path, the earth trembled faintly beneath my feet, a promise or a warning I couldn't tell. But for the first time I didn't lower my eyes when the villagers stared. I met them, crescent glowing openly, and the power humming in my veins tasted like freedom. The ordinary world was gone, replaced by a horizon vast and terrifying, and at its center stood the vampire prince, waiting for me to cross the final line. Our bond grew the way dawn creeps over mountains, slow, inevitable, painting everything in colors I'd never noticed before. The first time he spoke my true name, Leora. While brushing a strand of hair from my face, the sound settled in my bones like a lullaby I'd forgotten I knew. We met in the clearing now, under veils of starlight, and though the village slept miles away, every moment with him felt stolen and precious. He taught me to listen to the forest's heartbeat, pressing my palm to moss and showing how the trees whispered secrets of root and rain. I laughed, actually laughed, when a squirrel dropped an acorn on his head, and the sound of his answering chuckle, low and warm, wrapped around my heart like vines. "You undo me," he murmured, catching my hand to kiss the crescent mark, lips cool yet igniting fire along my veins. We spoke of everything and nothing. Favorite constellations, the way fear tastes like iron, the dreams that haunted us both. Once I confessed how the village's rejection carved hollows inside me, and he cupped my face, thumbs brushing away tears I hadn't realized were falling. "They fear what they cannot name," he said. "But I have named you, my equal, my anchor, my forever." The words should have overwhelmed me, but instead they fit, like a key turning in a lock rusted shut by years of doubt. Trust built in small gestures. Him catching me when I stumbled over roots, me braiding white roses into his hair while he closed his eyes in contentment. One night, he produced a tiny vial of starlight, actual captured glow, and tipped it onto my tongue. It tasted of midnight and hope, and for hours my skin shimmered, reflecting his wonder. "See how beautiful you are when you shine," he whispered, and I saw myself through his eyes, fierce, luminous, worthy. The confusion that once knotted my stomach loosened. Questions remained, but they felt less like threats and more like doors we'd opened together. We danced once, to no music but the wind, his hand at my waist guiding me in steps I somehow knew, and when I rested my head against his chest, I heard not one heartbeat but two mine, and an echo ancient and steady, matching my rhythm. "Always," he promised, the word a vow against my hair. Yet tension crept in on silent feet. The village elders scoured the woods with iron and salt, wolves shadowed our meetings with glowing eyes, and sometimes his gaze distant, haunted by shadows he wouldn't name. one twilight as fireflies stitched gold through the dark. I asked about the lake in my dreams, and pain flashed across his face like lightning. A memory we both carry, he said, voice rough. But some truths must wait until you're strong enough to hold them. I wanted to protest, but he kissed my forehead, the contact grounding me, and the argument died unspoken. Instead, I traced the faint scar along his jaw earned, he said, the night he first lost me, and felt the weight of centuries in that small mark. Our bond deepened in silence too, sitting back to back beneath the yew, feeling each other's warmth through layers of cloth and time, or him reading aloud from a book of poems written in a language that sang in my blood. Once I fell asleep against his shoulder, waking to find dawn gilding the clearing and him still there, eyes soft with wonder. You stayed, I whispered, awe and gratitude tangling. For you I would stop the sun. The words should have been impossible, yet they settled in my heart like truth. But that same morning as I returned home, I found the village square in uproar, livestock drained of blood, symbols carved into barn doors matching my crescent. Accusations flew, and though no one saw me, the net tightened. I ran to the clearing at dusk, tears streaming, and he caught me as I stumbled, arms a haven. They'll come for me again, I sobbed into his cloak, and his embrace tightened, fierce and protective. Then we face it together, he vowed, but his voice cracked on the last word, and when he pulled back, his eyes held oceans of regret. Before I could ask, a howl split the night, closer, coordinated, and he pressed something into my hand, a dagger of moon-forged silver, hilt warm from his touch. For protection, he said, until I can give you my name. The unexpected tension crackled like storm air. I wanted to refuse the blade, to demand answers, but the wolf circled the clearing, eyes glowing, and he stepped in front of me, cloak flaring like wings. Run, Leora, back to the village, lock your door. I'll hold them. Terror and love warred inside me, but his gaze begged obedience, and I fled, dagger clenched, heart tearing with every step. Behind me, snarls and the clash of shadow against fur faded into the night, and when I reached my cottage I barred the door, sliding down it to sob into my knees. The dagger's hilt bore an inscription I hadn't noticed. To my lost mate, found at last. The emotional revelation hit like dawn after endless night. I wasn't just falling for him. I was remembering a love that had survived death, time and forgetting. And whatever came next, whatever truths waited on that frozen lake, I would face them holding his name in my heart, even if I didn't know it yet. The revelation came on the night of the blood moon, when the sky turned the color of old roses and the air tasted of copper and endings. I'd slipped away to the clearing, dagger tucked into my boot, the pull of him stronger than fear, but the roses lay crushed, petals bleeding into the earth, and in their center stood a pedestal of black marble I'd never seen. On it rested a crystal orb swirling with storm clouds, and when I touched it, the world dissolved. Suddenly I was her, Leora, centuries ago, laughing in a ballroom of ice and starlight, crown of diamonds on my brow, his hand in mine as we danced beneath chandeliers that dripped frozen fire. He was Prince Cassian, heir to the vampire court, and I his destined mate, born human but promised to ascend through the bonding rite. We'd planned to unite our kinds, vampire and the ancient star-touched bloodline I carried, to end the war with the werewolves. But betrayal came wearing a friend's face. His advisor, jealous of our love, poisoned the bonding chalice meant for me. I drank, smiling, trusting, and the poison burned through my veins like liquid starfire, killing the body but not the soul. Cassian's scream shattered the chandeliers as I fell, and in his grief he defied death, binding my essence to the crescent moon, scattering my memories across lifetimes so I could be reborn safe from those who'd hunt me. The vision shifted, him searching through centuries, watching over every incarnation, saving me from accidents, illnesses, wolves wearing human skin, until this life, this drought, this hunt aligned like stars to bring me back. The orb cracked in my hands, shards falling like tears, and I was back in the clearing on my knees, gasping. Cassian, no, the prince, stood before me, eyes glowing with anguish and hope. Leora, he whispered, the name a prayer, and I saw the boy from the ballroom, the man who'd carried grief like armor for 500 years. You remember? Not a question. I rose, legs trembling, the dagger clattering to the ground because how could I ever wield it against him? You let me die, I said, voice breaking, but it wasn't accusation. It was awe at the love that had waited centuries. He fell to his knees too, cloak pooling, head bowed. I failed you once. Never again. The truth poured out then, how the advisor had become the werewolf alpha, how the drought was his curse to draw me out, how every sign, every dream was Cashin guiding me home. Heartbreak and beauty braided so tightly I couldn't breathe. I crawled to him, cupping his face, feeling the tremor in his jaw. You saved me in every life, I whispered, and his eyes closed, tears of blood tracking down pale cheeks. We clung to each other amid the ruined roses, centuries collapsing into a single embrace, and I felt the bond snap fully into place. A golden thread between our souls, humming with power. But the moment shattered with a howl that shook the earth, and the clearing filled with wolves, the alpha shifting to human form, eyes mad with triumph. The princess returns, he sneered, only to die again. Cashin rose, shielding me, shadows writhing like wings. Not this time, Valerian. The name struck like lightning, his traitor alive through dark pacts. The wolves lunged, but Cashin's power exploded, night-given form hurling them back. Run, he roared, but I couldn't leave him, not again. I grabbed the dagger, slicing my palm, blood welling bright. Together, I said, pressing my hand to his, our blood mingling, the bond flaring white-hot. The shockwave flattened the clearing, wolves whimpering, Valerian staggering. For a heartbeat, hope surged, but then Valerian smiled, cruel and knowing, and raised a talisman that pulsed with the same poison that killed me before. History repeats, he hissed, and the talisman shot a beam of black fire straight at my heart. Cashin twisted, taking the blow meant for me, and as he fell, crimson blooming across his chest, the world narrowed to his pain-filled eyes and the shocking, impossible truth. I'd remembered too late, and destiny's cruel joke was that love, even eternal, could still break. The world became a place of fractured edges and impossible choices, every breath a reminder that Cashin lay wounded in the hidden cave he'd shown me, the poison spreading like ink through his veins. I tended him with herbs and tears, the bond between us a lifeline humming with his pain, but the village had declared war on the demon lover, arming themselves with silver and lies. Werewolves prowled the borders, Valerian's curse twisting the land. Crops withered overnight, wells dried to dust, children fell ill with fever dreams of blood. The elders demanded my surrender, promising to spare the village if I walked into their circle of salt and iron. Love warred with logic. Stay with Cashin, let the land die. Leave him, maybe save everyone else. I sat by his bedside, his hand cold in mine, watching shadows flicker across his face as he fought the poison. Go, he rasped when consciousness returned, eyes fever bright. Live the life you were meant to. But the thought of a world without him was a blade to the gut. I kissed his knuckles, tasting salt and roses. There is no life without you. Yet danger pressed closer. Scouts reported werewolf packs massing, Valerian's talisman growing stronger on stolen blood. Cashin taught me to wield the bond, how to draw on his strength, how to shield my mind from Valerian's whispers that slithered through dreams, promising power if I betrayed my mate. Each lesson left us drained but closer, our souls twining tighter. One night, as I changed his bandages, he caught my wrist. If I die, you won't. Promise me you'll choose happiness. The words cracked something inside me. I pressed my forehead to his, tears falling. You are my happiness, you impossible man. But logic gnawed. The drought would kill thousands. The poison required a counterspell locked in the vampire court, unreachable without Cashin's signet, which Valerian had stolen centuries ago. I faced the hardest choice, to stay and watch him fade, or venture into the heart of enemy territory to retrieve the cure, risking capture, death, or worse, losing myself to the darkness Valerian offered. The unstable world mirrored my heart. Storms raged though the season was dry, lightning splitting oaks, rivers running backward. Villagers left offerings at my door, bread, then knives, then nooses. I burned them all, the smoke carrying my defiance to the stars. Cashin's moments of clarity grew rare. In one, he pressed the music box into my hands. If I fall, win this at dawn. It will guide you home. Home. The word tasted of the ballroom, of promises unkept. I kissed him fiercely, tasting desperation, then stood at the cave mouth as thunder rolled. The decision crystallized like ice. I would go to the werewolf stronghold, steal back the signet, brew the antidote, save my mate, save the land. Love over logic, emotion over fear. I donned his cloak, the fabric heavy with his scent, and stepped into the storm, dagger at my hip, music box in my pocket. Behind me, Cashin whispered my name like a prayer. Ahead, the forest parted, revealing a path lit by ghostly blue fire. His strength lent through the bond. But as I crested the ridge, a wolf's howl rose in triumph, and silhouetted against the blood moon stood Valerian, talisman glowing, a cage of shadow weaving shut behind me. The stakes skyrocketed. One wrong step and I'd lose not just Cashin, but the last piece of myself I'd only just found. I tightened my grip on the dagger, heart pounding a war drum, and ran toward the monster who'd stolen our forever, prepared to carve it back with my own hands. The deeper truths surfaced the way drowned memories rise in still water, slow, inevitable, and impossible to push back under. Deep in the werewolf stronghold, disguised by Cashin's cloak and the bond's shadow, I found the Hall of Records, ancient tapestries depicting our first life. Leora, starborn princess of a forgotten lineage, destined to bridge vampire and human realms. Cashin, promised to me before birth by the moon herself. But the tapestries lied by omission. Hidden threads revealed my bloodline wasn't just rare. It was the key to immortality for all supernatural kind, a power Valerian craved to rule eternally. Cashin had hidden me in mortality to protect me, erasing my memories each rebirth, but this time the drought was his own spell backfiring, meant to weaken Valerian but starving the land instead. The guilt in his fevered confessions haunted me. I thought I was saving you, but I damned us both. In the records, I discovered my mother hadn't abandoned me. She'd been Cashin's human ally, hiding me in the village until the stars aligned. The locket held her final letter, written in blood. Trust the prince, my star. He is your destiny and your shield. I clutched it, tears falling as footsteps echoed. Valerian's second, a woman with my mother's eyes. You're her spitting image, she whispered, revealing herself as my aunt, coerced into servitude. In hurried tones, she unveiled Valerian's plan. Use my blood in a ritual under the eclipse to bind all supernaturals to his will, with Cashin's death as the catalyst. The emotional weight crushed me. Every life, every loss orchestrated to this moment. My aunt pressed the signet into my hand, stolen at great cost, and a map to the antidote's ingredients. He loved you enough to break the world, she said. Now love him enough to mend it. I fled through tunnels, heart raw, the truths reshaping me. I wasn't a victim of fate but its architect, my power dormant but vast. Emerging into the storm, I raced to the cave, only to find it empty, claw marks scoring the walls, Cashin's blood trailing into the dark. Panic clawed my throat, but the bond pulsed. He was alive, moving, drawn by instinct to confront Valerian before the poison claimed him. I followed the trail to the frozen lake of my dreams, now real under cracking ice, and there they faced off. Cashin barely standing, shadows lashing weakly, Valerian, talisman blazing. She'll never be yours, Cashin snarled, but his voice broke. I stepped from the trees, signet raised, power uncoiling like dawn. She's not anyone's, I said, voice steady despite terror. She's Leora and she chooses. The twist hit like lightning. The ritual didn't need my death. It needed my willing sacrifice. A drop of heart's blood freely given to either heal or enslave. Valerian lunged, but Cashin intercepted, taking another blow. And as he fell through the ice, time slowed. I screamed, diving after him, the freezing water a shock that awakened every star in my veins. Beneath the surface, his eyes met mine, apology and love blazing, and I understood the final truth. Our bond was never about destiny. It was about choice repeated across lifetimes, and this time I chose us. I pressed my bleeding palm to his chest, the signet between us, and whispered the ancient words my aunt had taught me. Light exploded, the ice shattering, and Valerian's howl of rage was drowned by the bond's song. We rose together, Cashin gasping, poison burning away, but the cost hit hard. My power, once boundless, now tethered to his life. Kill him, free the world. Save him, risk everything. The emotional turning point crystallized as we stood on the lake, water streaming from our clothes, his arms around me fierce and trembling. You chose me, he whispered, awe and fear mingling. I kissed him, tasting eternity. Always. But Valerian vanished into the storm, weakened but alive, and the eclipse loomed in 3 days. The twist that kept hope flickering. My sacrifice hadn't enslaved anyone. It had awakened the land, rain beginning to fall, soft and healing. Yet the final battle awaited, and the choice was no longer mine alone. Cassian and I, bound by blood and truth, turned toward the horizon, ready to write the ending neither fate nor villain could steal. Tension coiled tighter than a storm about to break, every heartbeat a countdown to the eclipse. Cassian healed slowly, the bond between us a double-edged blade. His strength returned but my power flickered tied to his pulse. We trained in secret glades, him teaching me to wield starlight as a weapon, me showing him how human stubbornness could outlast immortality. Yet trust fractured under Valerian's whispers, he sent visions through the bond. Cassian crowned in blood, me kneeling at his feet, the world ash. I woke screaming and Cassian held me, but doubt crept in like frost. What if I'm the curse? I asked, voice small. He kissed my fears silent, but his eyes held shadows. The village, renewed by rain, still hunted us, branding me witch and him demon. We saved them anyway, anonymously leaving healed livestock, purified wells, but gratitude curdled into fear when children spoke of angels with glowing eyes. My aunt smuggled messages. Valerian gathered forces, promising my blood would end all supernatural's weaknesses. Hope faded as the eclipse neared. Cassian's wound reopened under strain, poison lingering like a curse. One night, despair crested. I found him at the lake, dagger to his heart. If I die, you're free, he said, voice hollow. I wrenched the blade away, cutting my hands, our blood mingling again. We end this together or not at all. But the internal struggle gnawed. Destiny screamed sacrifice, choice demanded defiance. Valerian struck at dawn, wolves storming our sanctuary. My aunt betrayed and bleeding in their jaws. Cassian fought like a tempest, but numbers overwhelmed. I unleashed starlight, felling dozens, yet Valerian's talisman drained me. In the chaos, Cassian fell, silver through his heart, and Valerian dragged me toward the ritual circle beneath the darkening sun. Your choice ends now, he snarled, forcing the dagger to my palm. Cassian's eyes met mine across the clearing, life fading, love blazing. Choose yourself, he mouthed, and heartbreak shattered me. Because choosing myself meant letting him go. Choosing us meant dooming the world. Trust broke like glass. I saw the boy who'd waited centuries, the man who'd burned worlds to keep me safe, and I couldn't. Valerian pressed the blade deeper, blood welling, the eclipse crowning the sky in fire. Hope was a dying ember, separation a blade at my throat, and as the ritual words began, I closed my eyes, the bond a thin thread stretching toward oblivion. The tension peaked in a single suspended breath. Love tested to breaking, destiny and choice colliding, and the world held its judgment in silence. The confrontation exploded beneath the eclipse's corona, a maelstrom of blood and starlight. Valerian's circle pulsed with stolen power. My aunt bound at its heart, Cassian's body chained opposite, silver dagger still piercing him. One drop willingly given, Valerian intoned, forcing my bleeding hand over the chalice. And all bow to me. But the bond screamed, Cassian's will lending me strength, and I twisted, starlight flaring from my wounds to shatter the chains. My aunt broke free, tossing me the true signet, and I caught it midair, pressing it to Cassian's chest. Light erupted, silver melting, his wound knitting as he rose, shadows coalescing into wings of night. We fought as one, his darkness my light, weaving a tapestry of destruction. Wolves fell, Valerian's talisman cracked, but he laughed, swallowing the poison that once killed me, becoming a monster of writhing shadow. You cannot win, he roared. Love is weakness. Cassian took a blast meant for me, crumbling, and rage ignited my power beyond limits. I stepped into the circle, blood dripping freely now, but not for Valerian, for the land, for every life he'd twisted. Love is the only weapon you never understood, I said, and drove the signet into the chalice, shattering it. The backlash hurled Valerian into the void between stars, his scream echoing into silence. But the cost? Cassian lay dying, my power burning out to save him, the eclipse demanding balance. I cradled him, tears falling onto his face. Stay, I begged. His hand rose, weak, tracing my cheek. Always. I kissed him, pouring what remained of my starlight into his veins, feeling my heartbeat slow. Sacrifice for sacrifice. The world blurred, but his eyes held me. Centuries of love in a single glance. Leora, he whispered, the name a vow, and as darkness claimed me, I saw the grand cliffhanger. The eclipse reversing, my power not fading but transforming. The bond pulling us both toward something beyond death, rebirth perhaps, or judgment. The final act hung suspended, love and fate entwined, the ultimate choice still echoing in the silence between heartbeats. The emotional climax unfolded in the space between one breath and the next, where life and death danced on a blade's edge. I poured everything into Cassian. Starlight, memory, the love that had survived centuries of separation. Feeling my essence unravel like thread from a loom. His wounds closed, shadows returning to his eyes, but my vision dimmed, the world narrowing to his face. "No!" he roared, cradling me as the eclipse reached totality, the sky a ring of fire. My aunt chanted the ancient words, weaving a counter-ritual, but the cost was clear. One soul for balance. I smiled, weak but certain. "Take me," I whispered. "Let him live." Cassian's tears fell like blood. "Not without you." The bond flared, golden and fierce, and in that moment we saw the truth the stars had hidden. We were never two souls but one, split by fear and reunited by choice. He pressed his forehead to mine, shadows merging with starlight, and together we spoke the final incantation, not of sacrifice but of fusion. Power surged, painful and beautiful, rewriting the laws that bound us. My body dissolved into light, his into shadow, and we became something new. A being of dusk and dawn, eternal but no longer divided. The eclipse shattered, sunlight exploding across the land, rain falling in sheets that washed away drought and curse alike. Valerian's remnants screamed into nothingness, the werewolf packs kneeling in awe, my aunt weeping with joy. We hovered above the lake, formless yet whole, feeling every heartbeat we'd saved. But the transformation demanded a vessel. We poured ourselves back into Cassian's healed body, my essence settling beside his soul like nesting doves. His eyes opened, storm gray now flecked with my starlight, and when he spoke our voices twined. "Leora." "Here," I answered through him, and we laughed, the sound echoing across lifetimes. The sacrifice wasn't death but unity, love transcending flesh. We rose, the land blooming beneath us, and turned toward the future we'd earned. The emotional peak crested in a single perfect moment. Cassian, no we, standing on the lake's surface, water solid beneath our feet, the crescent mark now a shared scar over our heart. The world was saved, but more importantly we were whole. The final act closed with a promise whispered to the dawn, together forever, in this life and every one to come. Dawn painted the world in hesitant gold, the first true sunrise after centuries of twilight, and we stood at the edge of the lake, Cassian's hand in mine, our shared heart beating steady and strong. The land breathed again. Rivers ran clear. Crops pushed through soil overnight. Children laughed in villages that had forgotten joy. Werewolves, freed from Valerian's curse, pledged allegiance to the new balance we embodied. My aunt crowned us not with gold but with white roses, the same that had marked our meeting place, and the ceremony was simple. A vow spoken to the rising sun, witnessed by stars that lingered in daylight. "I choose you," we said, voices harmonizing. "In every life, every form, every breath." The bond, once a thread, now blazed like a constellation within us. Leora and Cassian no longer separate but braided eternally. We walked the village paths openly, fears dissolving like mist. The elders knelt, begging forgiveness, and we granted it, for hate had been the true curse. At night we danced in the clearing, fireflies weaving crowns, the music box playing our song. Memories returned in gentle waves, ballroom glides, stolen kisses, promises kept across centuries, and we cherished each one. The final thread wove tight when we returned to the ravine where it began. The rock bore our entwined initials still, but now ivy grew over them, soft and living. Cassian lifted me as he had that first night, my arms around his neck, and we leaped, not falling but flying, shadows and starlight carrying us above the forest. Below, the village lights twinkled like grounded stars, and I understood home wasn't a place but the space between his heartbeats where mine lived. We landed at the lake, now thawed and mirror still, reflecting a sky full of promise. There we carved a new mark into an ancient U, a crescent embracing a sun, symbol of our union. The world was healed, love triumphant, destiny fulfilled not by force but by choice repeated until it became truth. As the sun climbed higher, gilding his hair, my skin, our shared smile, I leaned into him, feeling infinity in the curve of his arm. The story closed on that single strong image. Cassian and I, eternal yet gloriously alive, standing at water's edge as dragonflies skimmed the surface, their wings catching light like scattered prisms, and in the quiet ripple of the lake, our reflection showed not two but one perfect whole, the vampire prince and his lost mate, found at last beneath a sky that finally belonged to Dawn.